Hello, welcome back to the Undrafted podcast. Here with myself, Joshua Erdman, and my co-host, as always, Mr. Matty Ice, Matthew Arnold. It is February 26th, and we're ready to dive into some more sports talk today. So it is February 26th here, and today we're going to go with I think an interesting topic, a fun topic, a very large topic. I think in the world of sports today, Matt. Um, maybe more so than ever. And of course, going back, generations of decades, there's been so much, impactful and influential things that have happened in the world of sports. But I think kind of since, our, lifetime of sports fandom, I don't know if ever been in a more pivotal time than we are right now with some of the things that are kind of lingering out there. So what I wanted to do today is we're going to jump into our top five biggest changes needed in the world of sports today. And I'm going to go through and kind of lay out my top five, kind of see where we're at, and we'll get your thoughts on it and see if you agree with me or not. So, and this is going to be kind of an overarching, um, you know, top five of the impact that needs to be having the sports world. So not so much as some of the rule changes and things like that, and of course maybe those could be in the top five needs of biggest changes we need to see in the world of sports. So for instance, rule changes in regards to the targeting rule within football, I think are out there. The NBA 3 point line, or how do you just kind of change the style of the NBA play today, which I don't think is the greatest. Ratings are still doing pretty fine there, but it definitely seems like it's hurting the sport a bit from watchability standpoint, from the mass audience. Or, are one of the ones that drives me, the craziest, which I know soccer enthusiasts would probably call this blasphemy, but the offsides rule in soccer, I think it's just one of the dumbest things that you can ever see. And you've got a sport out there in hockey that shows you exactly how to do it. Doesn't reward bad defense. Doesn't after almost every goal you've got to go back and review. Hey, was this guy offsides? And does this goal actually stand? So those are some crazy things that are out there, and those are some specific rules, and maybe they are impactful enough that some of those things could be changed or need to be changed for to make a improvement in the way that we watch and consume sports here in America. But I'm going to go with the more overarching theme here of some of these issues that are presented, and I'm going to start with number five. This is a little bit more out there, but bring back Mike and Mike in the morning. I know as a sports fan myself, for decades, I grew up every morning having my cup of coffee, hanging out before class as a student, and watching Mike and Mike and bringing in that content was amazing. For whatever reasons, Mike Greenberg became such a big star. They kind of transitioned him to other things, and they took that away. So many great segments, just the way it was structured. I mean, now when I get up in the morning, I just can't really take in a lot of this, sports content that's being produced by ESPN and the other big stations. It's just, it's just not what it was. And it's not that, there aren't some really good stuff out there and a lot of, good sports analysts and commentators, stuff that certainly I consume as a sports fan. But it's just, that's my plea, is to bring back Mike and the Mike in the morning. It was simplistic, and I think it worked for everybody. It was wildly popular. Just one of those things, with time, that doesn't always need to be changed, right? If it's not broke, we don't need to fix it. And I think it, as we're talking about in the world of sports, especially here, in America, it was such a big part of our daily lives as sports fans. And, I think that has really made, I know, a drastic impact on kind of how much engagement I have within the world of sports, at all times. It should kind of get your thoughts on that, but that's just, what I wanted to throw out there. I do think it's impactful, but I'll get a little more serious here to go with. So that's my number five. To go with number four, it is a topic that's been talked about a lot, especially recently, is the tanking within the NBA. It's extremely noticeable and very apparent, right? And the NBA's got problems. We've got to talk about the structure of the game, the lack of defense, just being a 3 point competition. Of course, the Golden State Warriors, they kind of perfected that, and they kind of brought in this new style of gameplay for the NBA. And I've always been someone, because half the teams essentially in the field, when you talk about NBA, NHL, make the playoffs. I don't really kind of tune in too much until we get to playoff time. I mean, of course, I'm keeping a big eye here in Michigan. On my team's the Pistons, the Red Wings, and some marquee matchups that happen along the way. Tanking, it does have kind of a drastic effect, on the watchability, especially for those teams that are kind of not very relevant, or those teams that are probably not going to make the playoffs, and even in their markets. And I think when you're trying to take in consumption of a league like we do with the NFL, who's one of the leagues that's not on my list because not that they don't have flaws. Like I said, targeting's a big issue. But for the most part, they're definitely the most popular league here in America and certainly one of them across the world. I don't think there's a lot of major issues that's, going to either it's already bringing down the sport or potentially on the horizon we could see some real issues with. But with tanking, I think it's there, and there's a lot of different ideas and theories that are being thrown out there of maybe how do you fix that within the NBA. Um, one that I've liked, I've kind of heard. I think would be a good idea. Of course, they've already got the draft lottery, but it seems to not quite be enough, and that is staggered as well. So typically, the worse you are, the more chances you get. Sounds like that could be going away, and I agree with that. I also kind of agree. Maybe outside of the teams, there's a cutoff of teams at some point making the playoffs, whether it's the teams that make the finals or the semis or even the second round or what, or maybe it's everybody in the playoffs. You exclude them, but everyone else kind of has just an equal chance. Or maybe it's say, hey, if you're one of those teams that made the conference finals of those four teams, those teams get less odds, or those teams are restricted from picking, within the top 10 so high. But everything else is essentially random. That's I think some good ideas and some good movement, and that we're having talks about that because I do think, unfortunately, within the game of basketball, it's easier to tank than I think it is through playing a game of football, where everybody's still going for their personal stats and their personal contributions. Everybody's still playing for their next contract, and to keep up their own reputations. But you can still go out there and fill your stat sheet in the NBA and still kind of, a lot of games come down to the trailing minutes within the fourth quarter and kind of, take a back seat at that point. So it's just a lot harder, I think, in the game of football where you have to kind of be going all out. You can't really you could take organizationally a little bit better, but you're not really going to get tanking from the players as much. It just doesn't really work with the way that the game is structured and the way that it's played. So I think NBA tanking is a major issue. But I've got that at 4. At number 3, I've got the NASCAR schedule. So NASCAR is going through a lot of different changes these days. Just this year now, of course, the playoffs have been introduced several years back. They thought they would need to get away from that, from the standard. Hey, just all the races throughout the year, you're just accumulating points. Whoever got the most points at the end is your champion. I can understand why a change was made. You want to go to playoffs, definitely in American culture. That's kind of the thing to do. Um, but with the new rule that they've indicated is now just winning a race doesn't get you into that 16 field playoff. Now it is going to be more just off of points, and stage points has been introduced and all of that. Regardless of kind of how you shift it, because you could make an argument, maybe and I would prefer them to probably go back to more of the old way with some changes. I still think what would impact whether they went back to the old way, the keep of the playoff format, is the schedule in itself. Because the biggest thing now is when I love Daytona, I love NASCAR. I know you've grown up, you've liked NASCAR, and like Daytona is one of the best sporting events I think in this country. And I'll be honest, over the years the playoffs been here, I've really honestly only took in pretty much the last race when it comes down to the final four, because the biggest issue with that is their season or their playoff runs right into football schedule. And when you're competing as an American sport primarily with the NFL, with college football, that's always going to rule the roost, right? So when you get more of, I like NASCAR a lot, but man, it ain't football, right? And my attention's going to go to that. So over the summer, yeah, I'm watching a lot of races. I'm taking a lot of NASCAR content, especially early in the season. This is fun. But by the time we get to late in the season, playoffs, there's too much else as an American sports fan that's got my attention. And then specifically with the NFL, when you're getting into the nitty gritty of your playoff races, the biggest races of the season, um, I just think you're losing a lot of fans' attention. And I just feel like they could restructure it so that that last race of your championship four, comes down to probably that last Sunday in August, typically that last Sunday without NFL football, right before Labor Day. I think that would be, a home run change. I know it's not going to go over well probably with the NASCAR community for a lot of diehard NASCAR fans. That's their sport number one. Um, but I do think you're losing a lot of the audience because your diehard NASCAR fans are going to be there no matter what you do to the schedule. And I think you're able to keep so many fans interested in your sport and checked into your sport throughout if really you would probably have to shorten the season a bit, which I don't think is an issue. But if you didn't want to shorten the season, you could, is like they did in COVID. They had some midweek races, so they've shown that they can do it. So maybe if you got to have races on Wednesday nights at times to still kind of keep your your sponsorship obligations and things like that, and get in as many races as you can. It's probably hard to start the season because of weather and stuff like that, too much earlier. But I think if you, I don't think you necessarily need to have 36 races in a year. If you could get that down to maybe 30, or even just go to the 26, let's say in the regular season playoff. I still think you have, and then if you lower the races too, every race becomes more impactful, right? So I would widen that gap um, for the winner as far as the points that they get compared to like second place, to make those wins more impactful, and then just overall. And sure, you're not gonna be able to get away from it in NASCAR. It's something they've struggled with throughout its existence. Is making sure that the races towards the end of the year, which is why there's a playoff, are still impactful, because you might get down to the last 10 races, last 5 races, and it's all but decided. But I think that's just the reality of stock car racing and what you're going to run into. But I think that would be a lot better proposition to increase the fan base and say, hey, this is some really impactful stuff. We got people going for championships. We got people going for the biggest prize. That's what entertains us as sports fans. And if you could do that so that the season is concluded before we get into, the NFL season, then especially with them going mostly on Sundays, I think that would be a huge plus for the NASCAR schedule in the sport of NASCAR. Um, at number 2, I'm going to go into, obviously this is kind of a no-brainer, probably one of the ones that's coming up on people's minds the most, is NAL. I think specifically within college football. I think with college basketball, it's obviously there as well. But I think in college football, it's much more kind of a pressing issue and kind of in our face. And I think you could kind of blend in the transfer portal in there as well. But I mean, when you just have guys, just going 1 year at each school, and they're getting into the NFL, and they're getting the draft, or they're done with their careers, and they played for 4 different schools. So like, where's your alliance? The days of guys, we see all these old, stars of the NFL and current stars of the NFL going back to their alma maters, supporting their colleges on the sidelines and everywhere else. It's really always been cool to see, and we're going to enter a world where that's going to be kind of non-existent. Or they're going to choose one team, but it's going to be like, like, I'm sure like Fernando Mendoza will probably always link to Indiana, but I mean, he went through a few different teams, right? And he's had just the 1 year at Indiana, and that's where he's won his Heisman, national championship, and can be known for. But I mean, he's got 1 year of blood, sweat, and tears with that program. So one of the things that I would propose on NAL is, if we're going to treat this like a professional sport in college football, let's have these guys sign a contract, right? We're paying them anyways.
Hope y'all are having a great Thursday. It's a beautiful day out in my neck of the woods for back end of February in the eastern part of Montana. I think he's back. Shady's back again.
Gotcha. I apologize about that, folks. Sorry about, we had some technical difficulties there. Looks like we're still rocking and rolling, correct?
Looks good. I was trying to keep him a little bit entertained. I know I got technical difficulties too. My headset is dead. So if you guys can't hear me very well, it's because I'm still waiting for my earbuds to charge back up.
No, I got you there, Matt. If you want to keep it going for just a second, I will be right in.
All I know is right now he's making a lot of valid points, good topics. He's taking some time on this one and put some thought into this, and that's what he's good at. He's good at taking the time and putting the effort into his thoughts and research on this. And This is why he and I get along so well. He and I don't always see eye to eye on things, but we also have the mad respect towards the knowledge that we have. And
all right, thanks for hanging in there, folks. Thanks for covering for me there, Matt. So let me kind of jump back into it and get back to my thoughts. We're talking about the the NAL issues that are kind of prevalent today in college football and across college basketball as well. But as I was kind of talking about, I think if we're going to treat this like a professional sport, let's go ahead and make these players sign some contracts. Sure, they're going to have some wiggle room, and I always hate anything to do with agents. I think the whole how the agents kind of run everything within professional sports. I don't know how you undo that after all these decades and a century of it kind of working that way. But I don't think it's good for the sport. I really don't think it's best for the athletes. Certainly not the fans. I mean, financially, yes, probably in many aspects, sure, for the players, but I still think there's doing some disservices to them as well. And so, I mean, you were to structure NAL contracts, whereas to say, hey, we're going to offer a player, not that they could come over for a year, but they're probably going to take less money because teams are going to be incentivized. Hey, if you take a 3-year deal, come here for 3 years to our college, then you're going to get paid X amount more on a per year basis, right? Than just coming for just the 1 year, and then you can kind of do whatever you want because it is the wild wild west, and right now these players can do that, and that's not what NAL was intended to be. It's crazy how so fast we jumped to where we're at from where we were for so long, which was horrid as well, and it's just not as it was intended. And so I think for the fans, were it's not great to see, especially as fans of specific teams. You've got to wonder year in year out, are your best players going to leave, especially if your team's kind of struggling, but you see that there's some momentum building, or there's pieces that are developing, and teams that are coming together structurally, and all that can be blown up in one transfer portal opening because of what happens with NAL and the way that the transfer portal is allowed to operate today. I think it's a major issue. It's very complex. Could get into it, much more deeply. But I think everyone who follows, sports, specifically college sports today, definitely understands the gravity of it. And we've got to come up with a solution. I think that's one way to help it out. Let's put kids into contracts. Let's allow teams to offer, multi-year deals to these kids, and let's put some minimums, on there as well. Potentially maybe it is, a minimum of 2 years even. It's like, hey, no more one and dones. Like if you want to leave the next year kind of as it was before and you transferred out, you're not going to play next year. You're to lose that year of eligibility. So force them to say, hey, you've got to be here at least 2 years. But then, hey, if we might sign you to a 3-4 year deal if you're willing to accept it now. And, you can advance the sport in that way. And you would do this with even the recruits coming right out of college, right? Because, a lot of them are already getting the NIL funds. Now, if they're not getting paid NIL money, then, because they're not going to be your best players anyways, maybe you don't have to, put those kind of, bind them to any sort of contract. And if they want to come for a year and decide, hey, what's best for them because of playing time and things like that, or other teams willing to maybe make them an NIL offer when the current, institution and university that they're at isn't willing to do that because they just don't have the need for it, then you can allow that as well. So that's going to be one of the bigger issues. I know that's going to be talked about, and I know that changes are going to come, thankfully. It's just how fast do they come? What do they look like? It will be a big storyline for, I think, the next several years, in the world of sports here. And then my number one, which we're going to spend some time, I think, definitely talking about today, Matt. I'm going to bring you here in just a minute, is Major League Baseball right now and what's going on with Major League Baseball. So for its existence, there's really been no salary cap. There's a luxury tax, but you're seeing now teams like the Dodgers and the Mets, Yankees have abused it for years, and others, where they don't care. It doesn't apply. You're talking about billionaires here. They'll pay the luxury tax. It maybe slows them down, hinders them slightly. But as you can see in the Dodgers standpoint, it's not even doing that anymore. And the issue is, and I know right now baseball is seemingly in a pretty good place. It's exciting. The World Series last year was amazing between the Dodgers and Blue Jays. And so a lot of people are kind of harping back on that. Well, hey, Blue Jays took them to 7. Dodgers did go through some struggles. And overall, it was just a really exciting World Series. Seems like teams could contend. But at the end of the day, the Dodgers have now won back-to-back World Series. They also won it in 2020. And I think we're really in, that's why I talk about pivotal moments in the history of sports. Being a Major League Baseball fan, it's my favorite professional sport. My favorite sport is baseball. Is that I think we're in this pivotal moment where things can, and I think will, fall off a cliff real fast with fans, and other organizations when it comes to, hey, Dodgers have won it 2 years in a row, but what happens when they make it 3 years in a row, right? And then all of a sudden everyone is just playing for second place, or everyone's playing just to make it to the World Series for the American League so you can go see what you can possibly, the fight you can give the Dodgers. But I think real quick, you're going to have all these other fan bases just become disinterested because there's always that hope and that dream for all these teams that, hey, they can win a World Series. Look at some of the small market teams. Like I said, it's never been perfect. You can look at the Royals just recently, right? When they won the World Series. But they had a few-year window, and that's usually how it works with those small market teams, and that isn't the best either. But at least then it's, hey, you could build up through the draft, build up through your farm system, make spend a little bit of money at that time when it's time to strike and go sign some big name free agents that you can afford and, kind of strike gold and put a team together, but you're only going to have that window for so long because you're not going to afford to keep most of those best players. And then teams like the Dodgers and the Yankees, they're going to buy them out from you. That's just really what baseball's been. But at least, like I said, you've had that glimmer of hope. And I think every organization has had that, no matter really how small of a market you are, or even for the mid markets. Or now let's be real, what are we talking about? 4 or 5 teams that maybe still today are kind of truly thinking that they've got a chance to match up toe to toe. And nobody's as good as the Dodgers, but it is baseball. But even then, you might have 4 or 5 teams that think, hey, you know what? A 7 game series, we still might have a shot, kind of like the Blue Jays almost did last year. That's possible, but it's a shot. And for 2 years in a row now, it hasn't been enough. The Dodgers have got it. So what happens when it becomes 3 years or it becomes 4 years? And the reason I think this is of such big importance is we're going into a new CBA within after this season. And my prediction, man, and I really believe this, we're going to miss games. And I don't think we've missed games since, 1993? Major League Baseball has been a true lockout. I think that's going to happen. And I'm not going to be surprised if there's no baseball at all in 2027 because the issues that there are right now are so massive and they're so complex and there's going to be so much negotiating and stubbornness and give and take and everything else to try to get something different in place from what we've known for so long. I think we're going to have to miss a season of baseball. I just don't see how that's not going to happen because when you have a players union that's not going to want to agree to a lot of these changes, going up against the owners and everything else with the sponsorships, just the schedule and the way everything works, it is going to get extremely messy. And as baseball fans, it's not going to be very fun, but hopefully we come out on the other side, the better for it. And so I don't know what that solution is per se. Obviously, a salary cap. And there's a lot of talk about probably, a minimum floor. Let's because that's the problem too. Let's make some of these teams like, the Marlins and there's others. Force them to spend some money. And you're hearing a lot of comments come out there from general managers and owners and all of that. Where they're talking about, hey, winning, honestly, this isn't the most important thing, right? It's an experience at the ballpark. It's how you make your money and everything else. But it needs to be, right? It absolutely needs to be. Winning needs to be the number one thing. And if they're not going to make that their top priority, then the league at least has to step in to force them to make it a higher priority than it is. And part of that could be, hey, a floor. Hey, you're going to have to spend so much money on your roster. Or there's consequences or whatever they do, right? A lot of complications that smarter people than myself and people that do this all day long every day are going to have to get in a room and figure it all out over the course of the next year or two, right? And I think these changes hopefully are intimate. They need to be intimate. And I think we are in a really dangerous place in the world of Major League Baseball when overall I think there's a lot to like. I mean, you talk about the new pitch clock. ABS is coming, right? The pitch clock has been awesome. What a huge change to sports. Just the watchability of the game, especially when it's not your team, you're a casual, more of a casual fan, especially if you're more a casual fan of the league. You just want to turn into Sunday Night Baseball on ESPN, right? It's been tough to sit through 3.5 hour games a lot of times. So let's create these extra inning rules, put a guy on second, just speeds things up. And now that we're getting ABS, what will that do to the timing of the game? I don't think it'll have too much impact, but I think that'll be nice because for forever we've talked about how it's nonsense, how an umpire can blatantly miss a call and it can make such a drastic outcome on the game. So I think a lot of these rules are very good for what's happening with baseball, but then you've got this issue that there's just no salary cap. There's very little restrictions on teams to spend all the amount of money they have. And that's why we've seen the Yankees' dominance over the years, but it's never quite been to this extent where the Dodgers are just loading up and acquiring. I mean, they have an all-star team out there. I mean, you really could make the case, hey, you could take for the All-Star game, it could be the Dodgers versus basically the rest of Major League Baseball, and it would probably be a very competitive game and look like a typical All-Star game because that's what they're producing right now. And this is a major issue. If you want to share some thoughts, maybe if you've got some ideas on, what are some things you think baseball could put in place to help with this? Are these big changes that will come? But obviously, there's going to be a lot thrown out there. And it's just a very pivotal time in the world of Major League Baseball. So, Matt, my top 5 list as a whole. Go ahead and give me the initial thoughts on it. Throw out some of the things that that would be on your list as well, or your direct comments to some of my some of my items in the top 5, and then talk to me a little bit about Major League Baseball and what you think, man.
So I'm gonna go ooh at the top 2, and then the 3 is like, well, there it's more of a notch. I mean, I really feel like you hit it on the nail on the head with So you're going to get a big ooh with your top two. I'd probably just flip 1 and 2. More so because the tradition of what college sports is today isn't the same from when we were kids, from when our parents were kids, and so forth, So, I mean, the NASCAR thing, I get it, but it's so hard to compete, but it's also, there's still time left. Maybe not so much in college football when the championship is, because there's maybe like 2 or 3 leagues left in the college football season by the time the 36th race happens. But the NFL season, you still got the whole entire month of December, the whole entire month of November, more or less, and then January, whatever regular season games are left in January. So people are going to kind of lock, the true NASCAR fans will lock into that. And if they're football fans, they'll lock in after. Like you and I, if Dallas isn't on TV or if there isn't a big matchup on race 36 Sunday, you and I will probably be watching the championship race and then jumping back next Sunday to watch our Dallas Cowboys or another good football game on Sunday. Where I stand with like the baseball thing, and I'm going to get into the college thing because I think that's probably the biggest thing right now, is you can't really do much to stop it because the market's so big. I mean, you look at the owners. I mean, you look at some of the more expensive franchises. Yes, a lot of them are NFL teams, like Dallas, for example, the Cowboys. But you can contain it. But when you look at the owners compared to the NFL owners, I think there's some deeper pockets in Major League Baseball. Um, so I feel like what only way you can change it is teams got to scout better and have a 5-year plan. That's about the only way you can stop it. Get scouts, have multiple scouts going, scurrying the globe, getting these international players are going into these colleges and put the money towards better scouting is the only way I think you can kind of compete with the rich ones. Look, for example, we got a good example of the Blue Jays. They built with veteran pieces through trades. They didn't go and pay Max Scherzer a whole bunch of money, and he did a great job. Bo Bichette was one of their guys.
Yeah.
They've now since lost him to one of the big teams you mentioned. I believe you mentioned the Mets. They just lost him to there. And Vlad Jr. is a member, like of one of their guys that they have scouted. So it can be done. The small market teams can do it. I feel like Milwaukee was the best team in baseball last year, but they got beat by the wallet, I think. But you could see Milwaukee kind of build. Yes, they made that blockbuster trade to get Yelich. Yes, they make the trades to get to where they got. But the Dodgers are beatable. You look at look at the 2 players that had the 2 biggest impact in that game. Yes, it was the pitching of, I can't pronounce his last name, but the guy who made the big catch, Pegues, not a high-priced player. Will Smith, homegrown player. Yes, they build through free agency. Yes, you look at Kyle Tucker just signed a big contract, and Mookie Betts, they got him in a trade. They didn't pay for Mookie Betts. They basically got him for nothing. But other players, yeah, but they added those pieces to what they already had. LA is, yes, are they paying a bunch of money? Sure. But they do a pretty good job of building within their own system.
Well, Dodgers get some credit for that for sure. I mean, Dodgers have been good for how many years? I mean, the Dodgers are one of those teams that they couldn't get over the hump for the longest time, right? When Clayton Kershaw, right? That was always the thing with him.
One of their
Clayton
own.
Kershaw's the best pitcher on the planet, man, but he can't win the big one. He didn't do very well in the postseason. It's a different animal. And the Dodgers kept coming up short and kept coming up short. And they finally won in 2020, but then it was when it wasn't in front of fans. It was during COVID. And then then they finally broke through, last year. And so they deserve some credit for sure. But a lot of other teams also have done very well with their scouting and building up through the minors and signing free agents, but then they just don't have that extra luxury of that wallet and bringing in some of these best players and continuing to sign the biggest free agents out there. In baseball, I think it's just a unique sport just in the amount of players that contribute, right? So you've got obviously your rotation, your pitching staff, your bullpen, and then your 9 players. Then we obviously know you're facilitating in 2, 3 typical other guys into your daily lineups as well. So this would be harder for something like this to happen in like the NBA because then you're really putting all your eggs in your basket on 6 or 7 guys, and when also one of those guys gets injured or a couple of those guys just fall off a cliff a little bit, have down years, But in baseball, it's such a collection of a whole, right? Same thing as within football. So in baseball, when the Dodgers can continuously to say, hey, we could build so much depth by just sending out so much money, right, with their wallet. Um, that's what we're seeing, and their depth ultimately as what's been ruling the day, at the end of it, and been allowing themselves to have the success that they've had in these past 5 years. So I I hear what you're saying, and I get it can be done, and not that hey we might maybe next year somebody will beat the Dodgers, somebody will get to the World Series, maybe the Dodgers will get knocked out in the NLCS. It could happen, but then what happens the next year and the Dodgers win it again? And it's like we'll go through this phase of 8 years and the Dodgers win 6 of the 8. Like that's not good. Parity is always good, and with baseball we're walking away from parity, and I think that's a very dangerous sign. And yes, you could point to the Mets, right, who have been spending at times more money than the Dodgers, right, in some of these recent years, and they're right up there in payroll, and they're signing all these All Stars and all this stuff, and they're still coming up short. They're not even getting to World Series. They're sometimes not even getting to NLCSs. Um, that's and there's obviously some poor, I think, ownership there of how you're spending your money wisely, how you're building a culture and a team together. So Dodgers deserve all the credit for because it's not guaranteed by any means. These guys still have to go out there. They're human beings. They still have to produce. The locker room has to be good. The coaching has to be good. All of that stuff still has to play. But it's going to be a problem when one team, if they've got it figured out and they've got the formula kind of solved, if we're looking into a situation where hey we look another 5 years from now and Dodgers have won 5 of the last 7, that's a very bad sign, and I do think something's going to be done. I don't know if it'll be enough once we get after this season and we get into the new CBA, to try to balance it out, but they might implement a few different changes to the structure of the league, and it might just not be enough. The Dodgers still might dominate, and maybe one other team gets up there with them. Maybe the Yankees finally start figuring it out, or the Mets or Phillies, Boston. One of those teams has the ability to spend some money, but then I think you're going to end up into like a Premier League type situation, over in European soccer. Which has kind of always been the case, and it's different what they do over there with relegation and promotion, keeps it more interesting as well. But there's always been the big four, and I know Man City, of course, as of late, has kind of came in to be the top dog, and they're not a traditional top four, but still, it's the top clubs. I mean, it's these top 4 or 5 clubs over there in European soccer, and it is basically no salary cap. It works a lot different the way it's all structured, and that could overhaul as well. But you do see at least they've got 4, 5, and you do have someone kind of out of nowhere come up like Leicester City did in 2016. So like it still can happen over there, and I'm just not sure, in Major League Baseball with where we're heading, we're going to see a lot. We're not going to see the Kansas City Royals putting a run together, and winning a World Series. I don't know if we're going to see an Arizona Diamondbacks, even Detroit Tigers. I mean, we spent some money. We're kind of a mid-moderate, and hey, we're building a really good team. We've spent some money. We've got good pieces. We've got the best player in the world. Well, I'll say maybe number 2 or 3 in Tarek Skubal, out there on the mound. And so, like, if everything, comes together perfectly, could the Tigers potentially win the World Series next year? I mean, it would be the joy of my lifetime, right? If it could happen. Like, I don't think it's impossible. But I think, especially when you look at our lineup, and we could still make some, trade deadline acquisitions to bolster that. Do I really believe we can go up with the Dodgers in a 7-game series and beat them? I don't. Possible, probably not. And that's not great. It's great to have this excitement as a Tigers fan right now, as a baseball fan, about your team to this level, to know that this type of possibility. But always, there's so many teams competing, right? So it's always still kind of slim. Like there's something there, concrete to hold on to, which is great when your team gets to this point. But even then, you're still like, man, a lot of things got to go right, and we probably got to get some luck. And now you're like, okay, if all that even happens, you've still got the Dodgers at the end of the rainbow, right? And you got to get through them, and that's just kind of a crummy feeling to have. So, I think a little bit more work will be done. I think some changes can be made, and maybe more changes need to be made, than yourself when it comes to baseball. But yeah, I mean, it's going to be very, very tough. And, a lot of those things you pointed to, like scouting and farming and stuff, that probably becomes more, it already has probably become more important. But it doesn't mean it's going to be able to beat the Dodgers, right? or potentially be the next team that also kind of figures it out.
The Dodgers are beatable. The Dodgers 100%. They're one pitch away, one great catch away from losing that World Series. Period. End of story. I mean, Vlad Guerrero just didn't show up when he needed to. Bo Bichette, he was injured. Vlad Guerrero shows up one time in that clutch moment, like he gets paid to do. Toronto's win that World Series. Or if that pitcher throws the pitch a little bit differently, or Pegues takes a different read on that ball. There was the what ifs in that game.
I hope you're right. I hope my view on it isn't as bleak as it really is. Maybe we're going to start to see, the Dodgers, because it is hard to be the top dog when everyone's chasing you and every year knowing, and that motivation, right? There's so much motivation for so many teams out there that aren't winning obviously like our Tigers, right? The motivation, the inspiration, it's all there. When you're all these players and hey, you won it last year and you won it the year before, how locked in do you stay? There's something to that. So I hope that you're more right about it than I am. The future isn't as bleak as maybe I foresee it. That can become competitive, and it'll be really fun to watch the Dodgers get beat. Honestly, and watch David go up against these Goliaths and possibly bring him down to earth. So
I have two big examples from the Yankees era, from when they were just dominant.
Mm-hmm.
You look at two teams that beat them in the World Series. Florida, basically they win a World Series and they trade everyone off. Yep. They went and beat them. And then you look at the Arizona Diamondbacks, still fresh into Major League Baseball. Right, exactly. They had a very makeshift team. Yeah. They had no business. I mean, how many people have hit a walk-off hit off of Mariano Rivera? Less than 100?
I don't know.
Less than 50?
Luis Gonzalez, man.
So and it's there. Those teams are there. I mean, look at the Royals. They had that 3-4 year run.
It happens. And the Yankees teams, sure, absolutely can happen. But I don't think the Yankees teams were what the Dodgers are now either. And
they're bold now. I think I'd take the Yankees. The big weakness with the Dodgers, Toronto didn't expose that. Toronto could have easily swept them for as bad as their bullpen was.
Yeah, they didn't have Mariano Rivera, sure.
No, I'm talking about just with the Dodgers.
Yeah, and they didn't have that with the Yankees used to have, and I get that, and but eventually they might find that guy, right? If they keep spending this money, and they're going to spend it to find it. It's tough. So, Matt, you said you wanted to touch maybe on a little bit of the NAL and college football. We got about 10 minutes here, kind of on a time constraint. So if you want to jump into that a little bit, be happy to hear your thoughts.
Okay. Well, with where I stand on the NAL, I've always been against it. You and I've had our debates over the years about it. I feel like the athletes are already getting paid. Josh, let me ask you a question. Did you have to pay for college?
Yeah, I mean, dude, man, I'm right there with you. I've always been on this. I'm still paying my student loans to this day. I've got my college debt, so I've always kind of seen it as a slap in the face when these players talk about wanting money and all this stuff. It's like, hey, if you're on scholarship, you're getting free tuition. Like, there's a value to that. Get your degree too, because only like 10% of the guys who even get drafted honestly make enough money where they don't have to find out another job. They don't have to do something else. So, and for most of them, right, you don't make it at all. You get cut after a couple years. Some never really even make it to the bigs, right? So 100%. I mean, I'm lockstep with you in that regards. I've never really wanted an NIL. I think it was ridiculous when, kids could go down to an auto dealership and make a little bit of extra money for signing autographs and stuff like that. Like that, I think was fine, and you should really get, their coaches and recruiters should be able to, buy them lunch. That stuff I think all needed to come, but as far as actually getting contracts, no, not at all. Because I mean, I feel it firsthand. I have to pay my whole way through college, and I'm still paying off my student loan debts.
Let's see. Thinking here. It was on the tip of my tongue. Well, what comes first? Is it athlete student or student athlete? What are you going to U of M to go do? You going to go to U of M just to go play football? Or are you going to be a student too? To earn that right, you got to be a student. And it's going to take away from that. What would be a fun stats is these guys that are getting the NILs is where are their GPAs compared to where they once was. They're getting paid to be an athlete first. It's athlete student.
It's
as opposed to
it's a professional sport. And if it keeps going this way, then I would just say don't even have the kids go to school, But at the same token, if you want to say, hey, if you want to make X earn X amount of your contract, your GPA needs to be this. Or if you want to earn your full contract, you got to keep your GPA above this. And if it drops below this, then you're only getting X percentage, right? So,
and a little bit more serious a major. Little, don't just do some slapstick major type of deal. Just
yeah, there's slapstick majors, and there's, a lot of people look the other ways, and they've got tutors that are doing the work for the students and all that. So a lot of regulation could be done there too. It's not a bad thought. Um, yeah, I just think we're far away from that. I think we've gone well past that, and just got to kind of figure out how to reel in the NAL and the transfer portal.
And shoot, see, I was ready to chime in with my other two because there was two more things I wanted to touch base on this. It's just, it was there. Bear with me, y'all. I put in some graveyard hours and.
Well, Matt, as we're short on time here, let's do this. Try to catch your thoughts. If you get them, you can spill them off here at the end.
Okay.
Let's jump into my favorite segment on every show. Guess who? I like to play some trivia with May here. If you joined us for our first couple episodes, you kind of know the rules. I'm going to go ahead and throw out 3 facts about a certain player. We'll see if Matt can get it. He'll either guess or he'll pass, and then I'll give him a 4th, and then if we needed to, we'll go to a 5th, okay? So, large conversation today around the world of baseball, Major League Baseball. So this is a Major League Baseball player. I'm going to go ahead and give you the first 3 here, Matt. Let's see if you can get this one. I think you're 1-1 on the season, right? So, all right.
I'm 1-2. And you got me stumped with the Rusty Wallace last week.
That's right. All right, so this player, his last Major League Baseball appearance came in October of 2012. All right, let's put that in your database. He played third base for the majority of his career. He did switch to left field for 2 years, and he's the all-time hits leader for that franchise, for the franchise that he played his whole career with. You got to guess just off of those 3. And I know they're a little vague, but that last one, might narrow it down a little bit for you. So if you put all that together.
Well, one name comes to mind. I just don't know when it's the retirement. When did he retire? But I feel like I'm leaning towards someone from one of my all-time favorite players on my favorite team growing up. I'm going to lean, I'm guessing it's going to be Chipper Jones.
My guy, you got it there. First round, first time. Very good. Yeah, props on that. I was almost, because I know how much you love the Atlanta Braves, and I was a big fan of them too, man. With Maddox and Glavine and Rocker, and oh man, back in the Andrew Jones, loved them. I've kind of fallen out of the Braves a little bit here over the past, decade or so. But yeah, I was thinking, just because you're such a Braves fan and such a Chipper fan, you might be able to get that one. That's why I want to keep it a little bit vague. So props to you for getting that. 4th clue, I think you probably would have got it if we would have got it there. He was the first pick. You don't remember what year he was drafted?
Not right off. I'd have to do some digging, so no.
Okay, 1990. And then what's really interesting about Chipper Jones as well is, in his rookie year of 1995, that's when they won the World Series championship. Chipper Jones is a rookie. And I always like to throw out a little interesting fact on these players as well. I actually found a couple. But the one I'll go with here to start is now what Chipper's doing today. He's currently a co-owner and co-host of the television show Major League Bowhunter, airing on Sportsman Channel.
Another fun little tidbit with Chipper Jones is he named his son Shea. The Shea Stadium was one of his favorite stadiums to play in as a player.
So another little fun tidbit about Chipper Jones I learned. Also regarding a kid of his, maybe not the greatest, fact on his resume is his first divorce was due to an affair with a Hooters waitress, where she had a kid 2 years before the divorce happened. Good old Chipper, man.
Good old prototypical athlete that has everything but wants.
Yep, wants a little more.
Wants a few more cherries on that Sunday.
Everybody's kryptonite, but it got Chipper. But yeah, he's still a co-host of the show, Dudes Things. Obviously, an all-time great player, Hall of Famer. But yeah, so props to you, Matt. Yeah, real quick, we have about a minute or so left. If you want to talk a little bit more on the NAL, if anything came to you that you wanted to point out there.
Nah, see, it's gonna be on the tip of my tongue later. I'm not gonna remember it until later. It sucks because they were 2 big points, but my brain isn't quite all there today.
All right, man. We'll excuse you. But thank all of you who do take the time to listen, and we hope we've brought some valuable content, or at least just some chatter. Once again, this is the Undrafted podcast. Not out here chasing clout. We're simply just talking sports. You have a great week.
Take care, y'all. Stay safe.